Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars disappear behind alien ships. The view screen showed hundreds of vessels from 7 different species, all pointed at Earth like weapons ready to fire. Jake had been in space for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The enemy fleet stretched as far as sensors could reach, and every ship carried enough firepower to destroy a planet. Admiral Lisa Carter walked onto the bridge with her face set like stone. She carried a datapad that contained the message every human had been waiting for since the blockade began 3 days ago. The alien coalition had finally sent their demands, and Jake knew from her expression that the news was not good. Lisa had fought in the Border Wars and the Titan Rebellion, but even she looked shaken by what she had read. The communication officer turned to face them with worry in his eyes. Lieutenant Danny Walsh had been monitoring alien transmissions for hours, and his equipment showed massive energy buildups across the entire enemy fleet. Danny reported that the aliens were charging their weapons and preparing for immediate action if humans did not respond to their message within the next hour. Lisa activated the main display, and the bridge crew gathered around to hear humanity's fate. The hologram showed a tall reptilian creature with golden scales and cold yellow eyes. This was High Commander Vex of the Zephyrian Empire, speaking for all 7 species in the coalition. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, as he delivered the ultimatum that would change everything. The alien leader explained that humans had expanded too quickly across the galaxy and posed a threat to established civilizations. He said that human aggression and unpredictable nature made them dangerous to peaceful species everywhere. The coalition had decided that humanity must be controlled before they could cause more problems. Vex gave humans 72 hours to surrender completely or face total destruction. Jake listened as the alien outlined the terms of surrender. All human colonies would be abandoned and their populations relocated to designated worlds under alien supervision. Human technology would be confiscated and their ships destroyed. Earth would become a protectorate with alien governors controlling every aspect of human society. Humans would work for the coalition as laborers and servants with no rights or freedoms. Captain Ryan Brooks contacted the bridge from Defense Station Alpha on the outer rim of human space. Ryan commanded the first line of defense against alien attack, and his report made the situation even worse. Sensors showed that the enemy had completely surrounded human territory with overlapping fields of fire. No ship could escape and no help could arrive from outside. The aliens had planned this operation perfectly. Ryan counted over 3,000 enemy vessels of various sizes, with more arriving every hour. The largest ships belonged to the Saurian Republic, and each one was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The smallest ships came from the Insectoid Collective, and they moved in swarms of hundreds. Every species had brought their best weapons and their most experienced crews to ensure that humans could not resist. Dr. Helen Ward joined the senior staff meeting in the war room below the bridge. Helen had studied alien species for 20 years and understood their cultures better than anyone else in human space. She explained that the coalition was unusual because these 7 species normally competed with each other for territory and resources. The fact that they had united against humanity showed how much they feared human expansion. Helen identified each member of the coalition and their likely motivations for joining the attack. The Zephyrian Empire wanted to eliminate competition for new worlds. The Saurian Republic sought revenge for human victories in previous conflicts. The Aquarian Federation feared human naval technology. The Crystalline Collective wanted access to human mining techniques. The Verdanian Republic followed stronger allies for protection. The Insectoid Collective simply enjoyed warfare. The Catherian Star Union had been pressured to join by threats from larger powers. Admiral Carter called for a vote from the Global Defense Council representatives who had gathered on Earth for this crisis. Each regional commander would decide whether humanity should accept alien terms or fight against impossible odds. The debate lasted only minutes because every commander gave the same answer. Humans would not surrender their freedom, no matter how many enemies they faced. Jake watched as Lisa prepared to send humanity's response to the waiting alien fleet. She stood straight and spoke clearly as she recorded the message that would seal their fate. Lisa told High Commander Vex that humans rejected all terms of surrender and would defend their worlds with everything they had. She explained that humanity had never bowed to tyrants before and would not start now even if it meant extinction. The alien response came within minutes, and it was exactly what everyone expected. High Commander Vex announced that the coalition would begin military operations against all human targets at the end of the 72-hour deadline. He warned that humanity's refusal to submit would result in complete destruction of their civilization. The transmission ended with a countdown timer showing exactly how much time humans had left to change their minds. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew and saw determination instead of fear on their faces. These men and women knew they were about to fight a war they could not win, but none of them suggested surrender. They began preparing for battle with calm efficiency while alien ships moved into attack positions around them. The next 3 days would decide whether humanity survived as a free species or died with honor among the stars. The countdown timer reached 0 and alien ships opened fire across human space. Captain Greg Austin watched from his command chair as enemy missiles streaked toward the colony of New Denver, where 2 million civilians lived and worked. Greg commanded the defense fleet of 12 human ships against an alien force of over 200 vessels, but he did not hesitate to order his pilots into battle. The odds meant nothing when innocent lives were at stake. Greg's fighters moved like angry wasps around the massive alien battleships. Human pilots used speed and maneuverability to avoid enemy weapons while striking at weak points in alien armor. The Saurian ships were powerful but slow, and their gunners could not track the small human fighters that darted between their hulls. Each successful attack damaged vital systems and forced alien commanders to split their attention between offense and defense. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster coordinated evacuation efforts from the surface of New Denver while battles raged overhead. Amy had 36 hours to move 2 million people to underground shelters before alien bombardment reached the planet. She organized civilian volunteers into emergency crews and turned every available vehicle into a rescue transport. The colonists worked together with desperate efficiency as enemy ships grew larger in the sky above them. Amy discovered that civilians did not want to hide in bunkers while their defenders fought alone in space. Factory workers converted production lines to build weapons and ammunition. Farmers donated their equipment to dig defensive positions around population centers. Even children helped by carrying supplies and messages between adult work crews. The entire colony became a fortress, manned by ordinary people who refused to abandon their home. Engineer Nick Davis worked in the shipyards of Mars Colony to modify human vessels with experimental technology. Nick had 72 hours to upgrade every available ship before the main alien fleet reached the inner worlds. He stripped mining equipment from cargo haulers and welded the heavy drills onto fighter frames. Transport ships received missile launchers designed for planetary defense. Even civilian yachts got armor plating and military sensors. Nick's innovations came from desperation and human creativity rather than advanced science. He used industrial lasers as ship weapons and cargo containers as additional armor. Mining. Explosives became warheads for improvised missiles. Construction robots were reprogrammed as automated gunners. Every modification violated safety regulations and military standards, but desperate times required desperate solutions. General Pete Sullivan implemented the strategy that would define human resistance for the next 2 years. Pete commanded ground forces across 17 colonies, and he knew that conventional tactics would fail against superior alien technology. Instead, he created the plan that humans would later call the Hornet's Nest. Every retreat would cost the aliens dearly, and every advance would lead them into prepared killing zones. Pete's soldiers received orders to make alien victory as expensive as possible. Military bases were rigged with explosives before evacuation. Supply depots were poisoned or booby-trapped. Communication networks included hidden viruses that would activate when aliens tried to use them. Even abandoned equipment was modified to malfunction at critical moments. The retreating humans left behind a trail of unpleasant surprises. The first major engagement occurred at Titan Station, where Captain Greg Austin made his final stand. Greg had lost 8 of his 12 ships, but he managed to destroy over 50 alien vessels before his ammunition ran out. The station's massive guns continued firing until alien bombardment finally silenced them. Greg and his remaining crew evacuated in the last working shuttle as Titan Station exploded behind them. The aliens learned their first lesson about human determination when they tried to occupy the ruins of Titan Station. Hidden charges detonated as soon as alien troops entered the facility. Emergency systems activated to flood sections with toxic gas. Automated weapons fired on anyone not wearing human identification codes. The aliens gained control of empty corridors and broken equipment, while human mines killed their soldiers for weeks afterward. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster led the defense of New Denver's surface installations after the evacuation was complete. Amy's civilian volunteers had become an effective militia armed with industrial tools converted into weapons. They used their knowledge of local terrain to ambush alien patrols and sabotage enemy equipment. The aliens controlled the sky, but humans owned the ground where they had lived and worked for generations. Amy's people fought with farm equipment modified for war. Tractors became mobile gun platforms with welded armor and heavy weapons. Crop dusters dropped explosives instead of fertilizer. Construction vehicles carried troops through underground tunnels that connected every major building. The aliens found themselves fighting an entire population instead of just military forces. Engineer Nick Davis completed his most important project when he finished upgrading the transport ship Lucky Strike. Nick had turned a civilian cargo hauler into a stealth vessel capable of penetrating alien blockades. The ship carried no weapons, but its cargo was more valuable than any missile. Nick had loaded it with plans and equipment needed to build weapons on worlds cut off from military support. The Lucky Strike launched from Mars Colony during a massive diversionary attack that drew alien attention away from the shipyards. Nick piloted the vessel himself through the enemy blockade using sensor modifications that made his ship invisible to alien detection systems. The cargo he delivered to isolated colonies would later become the foundation of human resistance across dozens of worlds. General Pete Sullivan watched his strategy succeed beyond his wildest hopes. The aliens had expected quick victory against inferior opponents, but they found themselves bogged down in a grinding war of attrition. Every planet they attacked required months to capture completely. Every colony they occupied needed thousands of troops to maintain control. The Hornet's Nest was working exactly as planned. Pete received reports from across human space that showed alien morale beginning to crack. Enemy commanders argued among themselves about tactics and strategy. Some species wanted to negotiate, while others demanded total destruction of human resistance. The coalition that had seemed so unified 3 months ago was starting to show cracks under the pressure of unexpected human defiance. The second phase of the war began when human raiders struck their first target behind enemy lines. Captain Greg Austin led a squadron of modified fighters in an attack on the alien supply depot at Kepler Station. The raid succeeded in destroying fuel and ammunition stockpiles that would have supported alien operations for months. More importantly, it proved that humans could strike back even while surrounded and outnumbered. 6 months into the war, Captain Maria Lopez led her squadron through the asteroid fields of the Ceres system toward the heavily defended Zephyrian supply depot. Maria commanded 24 pilots in modified fighters that carried barely enough fuel to reach their target. The return journey would be impossible unless they captured enemy fuel supplies, but Maria had volunteered for this mission knowing the odds. Her brother had died defending Earth's moon, and she wanted revenge against the aliens who started this war. Maria's fighters approached the depot using the asteroids as cover, while enemy sensors swept space around them. The Zephyrian base consisted of 6 massive storage platforms connected by defensive stations bristling with weapons. 300 alien ships provided escort for the facility that supplied the entire enemy fleet in this sector. Maria counted the opposition and calculated that her small force would face odds of more than 10-1 in the coming battle. The attack began when Maria's pilots fired their missiles at maximum range and immediately scattered to avoid return fire. Human weapons were less powerful than alien systems, but they were faster and more accurate. The first salvo destroyed 2 defensive stations and damaged a storage platform before enemy gunners could respond. Maria led her fighters in a wild charge through the enemy formation while explosions lit up space around them. Dr. Stephen Clark analyzed intercepted alien communications from his laboratory on Europa Station. Stephen had spent years learning to decode enemy transmissions, and his work revealed cracks appearing in the coalition that surrounded human space. The Aquarian Federation was questioning the cost of this war, while the Saurian Republic demanded more aggressive tactics. Several smaller species were privately discussing separate peace negotiations with human representatives. Stephen discovered that alien casualties were much higher than their propaganda claimed. The Crystalline Collective had lost nearly half their fleet trying to capture just 3 human colonies. The Insectoid Collective was experiencing supply shortages because human raiders kept destroying their cargo ships. Even the powerful Zephyrian Empire was having trouble replacing equipment faster than humans could destroy it. The enemy was winning, but paying a terrible price for every victory. The most disturbing intelligence that Stephen uncovered was a secret project called the Planet Killer. Alien scientists were building a weapon capable of sterilizing entire worlds by destroying their atmospheres. The device would eliminate all life on Earth and its colonies within hours. Construction was nearly complete at a hidden facility in the Tau Ceti system, and the weapon would be ready for use within 3 months. Commander Beth Young received the Planet Killer intelligence during a meeting with human resistance leaders. Beth commanded special operations forces that conducted raids behind enemy lines, and she immediately began planning a mission to destroy the alien superweapon. The facility was protected by the largest concentration of enemy ships in the galaxy, but Beth knew that humanity would face extinction if the Planet Killer became operational. Beth's reconnaissance teams reported that the Tau Ceti facility was defended by ships from all 7 coalition species working together for the first time since the war began. The aliens clearly understood the importance of their new weapon and were taking no chances with its security. Any attack would face the combined firepower of the entire enemy alliance, with no possibility of escape or reinforcement. Lieutenant Paul Smith led a scouting mission deep into enemy territory to gather intelligence about coalition supply lines. Paul commanded a stealth ship that could avoid alien sensors, but his crew of 6 volunteers knew they would be executed if captured. The mission took them through 5 different alien-controlled systems where enemy patrols searched constantly for human infiltrators. Paul discovered that the alien coalition was much larger than humans had realized. 17 different species contributed ships and resources to the war effort against humanity. Most were minor powers following the lead of stronger allies, but their combined forces represented nearly every advanced civilization in the local galaxy. Humanity was fighting alone against an enemy that included almost everyone else. The intelligence that Paul gathered revealed serious coordination problems within the alien alliance. Different species used incompatible communication systems and command structures. The Saurian Republic refused to share tactical information with the Aquarian Federation because of ancient territorial disputes. The Crystalline Collective would not operate in the same systems as the Insectoid Collective due to biological incompatibility. Each species maintained separate supply lines and strategic objectives. Captain Maria Lopez completed her mission against the Zephyrian depot but lost 18 of her 24 pilots in the process. The attack destroyed enough fuel and ammunition to cripple alien operations in 3 star systems for months. More importantly, The raid proved that humans could strike at targets the enemy considered completely secure. Maria and her 5 surviving pilots became heroes, but their victory came at a cost that humanity could not afford to repeat. Maria's success inspired similar attacks across human space as other commanders launched desperate missions against alien supply lines. Captain Tony Miller destroyed a Saurian repair facility with suicide bombers hidden in cargo containers. Major Kate Wilson led Marines in a ground assault that captured an Aquarian communications center. Commander Bob Harris used converted mining ships to ram a crystalline collective fleet anchorage. Each victory weakened the enemy but cost irreplaceable human lives and equipment. Dr. Stephen Clark presented his analysis to Admiral Carter and the senior staff in a briefing that changed human strategy. Stephen explained that the alien coalition was showing signs of serious strain after 6 months of unexpected resistance. Several species were questioning their commitment to the war, while others demanded escalation to total genocide. The alliance, that had seemed invincible, was beginning to fracture under pressure. Stephen recommended that humans focus their attacks on exposing and widening the cracks in enemy unity. Raids should target facilities shared by multiple species to increase friction between allies. Propaganda broadcasts should emphasize the cost of the war to alien civilians. Captured enemy personnel should be treated well and released with stories of human reasonableness. The goal was to make coalition members question whether they were fighting for the right reasons. Commander Beth Young began preparing for the most important mission of the war. Beth would lead a strike force of 50 ships and 300 volunteers against the Planet Killer facility in the Tau Ceti system. The mission had almost no chance of success, but humanity faced certain extinction if the alien superweapon became operational. Beth and her people would either destroy the device or die trying. Beth's volunteers came from every branch of human military service and included some of the best pilots and soldiers in space. They knew this was a one-way mission, but every person volunteered eagerly for the chance to strike back at the enemy. The briefing room was silent as Beth explained the plan that would either save humanity or destroy the last of its finest defenders in a futile gesture of defiance. Lieutenant Paul Smith returned from his reconnaissance mission with maps of alien territory and detailed intelligence about enemy weaknesses. Paul had lost 3 crew members to alien patrols, but his information would be invaluable for planning future operations. Most importantly, he confirmed that several coalition species were secretly negotiating with each other about ending their participation in the war against humanity. Commander Julia Roberts watched through her periscope as the first alien ships began withdrawing from Sector 7. Julia commanded the submarine fleet that patrolled the gas giant Neptune, and her sensors showed crystalline collective vessels abandoning their positions after 8 months of costly fighting. The crystal-based aliens had lost over 60% of their fleet trying to capture human installations in the outer system, and their government had finally decided to cut their losses. Julia immediately contacted Admiral Carter with news of the alien withdrawal. This was the first time any coalition member had voluntarily abandoned territory during the war, and it represented a major crack in enemy unity. The gap left by crystalline ships created opportunities for human forces to break through the blockade that had surrounded Earth since the beginning of hostilities. Julia recommended an immediate assault to exploit this weakness before other alien species could fill the void. The withdrawal had consequences far beyond military strategy. Dr. Helen Ward monitored alien communications and reported that other coalition members were angry about the crystalline decision to abandon the war. The Saurian Republic accused their former allies of cowardice, while the Zephyrian Empire threatened to invade crystalline territory. The united front that had made the alien coalition so dangerous was beginning to collapse under the strain of human resistance. Captain Derek Knight led the mission that would change everything about human intelligence gathering. Derek commanded a special operations team tasked with capturing an intact alien communication array from a lightly defended monitoring station. The facility contained quantum processors that handled messages between all coalition members, and Derek's engineers believed they could crack the encryption codes that protected enemy transmissions. Derek's team approached the station hidden inside, a captured alien cargo ship that transmitted proper identification codes. The deception worked perfectly, and station security allowed them to dock without challenge. Derek and his 12 specialists overwhelmed the alien crew within minutes and secured the communication equipment before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The intelligence gathered from this raid would prove more valuable than any military victory. The captured alien computers revealed the true state of the coalition after 8 months of war. 3 species were actively negotiating to withdraw from the conflict, while 2 others were demanding immediate use of planet-killing weapons against human worlds. The Aquarian Federation was experiencing civil unrest as their population protested the enormous cost of fighting humans. The Verdanian Republic had secretly approached neutral parties about mediating a peace settlement. Most importantly, Derek's intelligence showed that several coalition members were unhappy with Zephyrian leadership. The Reptilian Empire had started the war and continued to demand total human extinction, while other species preferred limited objectives. This disagreement was causing serious friction within the alliance, and some members were considering direct action against their supposed allies. Dr. Kevin Moore completed his greatest achievement in the underground laboratories of Ceres Station. Kevin had spent months analyzing captured alien technology and finally succeeded in creating an improved version of enemy defensive systems. Human shield generators now provided better protection than anything the aliens possessed, and the new devices could be installed on ships and stations throughout human space. Kevin's breakthrough came from understanding that alien technology was designed for standardized applications while human engineering focused on adaptability. By combining alien hardware with human software, Kevin created hybrid systems that performed far better than either technology could achieve alone. The shield generators were just the beginning of a revolution that would transform human military capabilities. The first test of Kevin's shields occurred when Captain Greg Austin's squadron encountered a Saurian patrol near the Jupiter shipyards. Greg's fighters were badly outnumbered, but their new defensive systems allowed them to survive concentrated enemy fire long enough to strike back effectively. 3 alien ships were destroyed, while all human vessels returned safely to base. The battle marked the first time human forces had achieved a favorable exchange ratio against superior numbers. Major Susan Blake established contact with resistance movements on worlds controlled by coalition members. Susan commanded human intelligence operations, and her agents discovered that several alien species included populations that opposed the war against humanity. These dissidents were inspired by human refusal to surrender and had begun organizing their own rebellions against coalition governments. Susan's most valuable contact was a group of Aquarian naval officers who provided detailed information about their fleet movements and supply schedules. These officers believed that their government had made a mistake by joining the anti-human coalition, and they wanted to help end a war that was devastating both sides. Similar resistance groups existed within the Verdanian Republic and among the client species that served larger powers. The rebellion that Susan helped coordinate began on 3 Aquarian worlds simultaneously. Civilian populations rose against coalition recruitment centers, while military units refused orders to attack human targets. The uprising spread rapidly as news of human defiance inspired aliens who had their own grievances against the current order. Within weeks, the Aquarian Federation was fighting a civil war that made continuation of the anti-human campaign impossible. Commander Beth Young led her strike force toward the planet killer facility in the Tau Ceti system, knowing that this mission would determine humanity's fate. Beth commanded 50 ships crewed by volunteers who understood they were unlikely to survive the attack. The alien superweapon was nearly complete and would be operational within days unless her force could destroy it. The approach to Tau Ceti took Beth's ships through territory controlled by 6 different alien species. Enemy patrols searched constantly, for human infiltrators, and the slightest mistake would alert defenders to the incoming attack. Beth's pilots used captured alien codes and identification signals to bluff their way past security checkpoints while praying that their deception would not be discovered. Beth reached the target system and found the Planet Killer facility protected by the largest concentration of alien ships ever assembled. Over 500 vessels from all 7 coalition members surrounded the construction platform where the superweapon waited for final activation. The defensive fleet included the newest and most powerful ships that each species could provide, along with their most experienced commanders. The attack began when Beth's ships dropped their disguises and fired everything they had at the Planet Killer platform. Human missiles and energy weapons struck the facility from multiple directions, while alien defenders struggled to respond to the surprise assault. The first explosions damaged critical systems and delayed the weapon's activation sequence, but hundreds of enemy ships were converging on the human attackers. Beth's volunteers fought with desperate courage against impossible odds as alien reinforcements surrounded them. Human ships rammed enemy vessels when their weapons ran out of ammunition. Pilots ejected from damaged fighters to board alien craft and sabotage them from within. Even as her force was being destroyed, Beth continued directing the attack until an explosion finally silenced her communications. The Planet Killer facility exploded in a chain reaction that destroyed the superweapon and dozens of nearby alien ships. Beth and her volunteers had succeeded in their mission, but only 3 human vessels survived to escape the system. The sacrifice of so many heroes had saved humanity from extinction and proved that humans would pay any price to remain free. News of the Planet Killer's destruction spread rapidly through both human and alien space. Coalition members who had supported the superweapon project were horrified by its loss, while those who had opposed it used the failure to demand policy changes. The Aquarian Federation formally announced its withdrawal from the coalition, while the Verdanian Republic opened secret negotiations with human representatives about ending hostilities. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the conference room aboard the UES Defiance as she received the most important message of the war. The Verdanian Republic had formally withdrawn from the alien coalition and was offering humanity a non-aggression pact along with limited trade agreements. Lisa knew this moment marked the beginning of the end for the alliance that had once seemed invincible. After 10 months of desperate fighting, the enemy was finally breaking apart. The Verdanian withdrawal came with valuable intelligence about remaining coalition members. Verdanian diplomats revealed that the Zephyrian Empire was planning to use biological weapons against human worlds within the next month. The Saurian Republic had secretly approached the Insectoid Collective about forming a separate alliance to continue the war. The Catherian Star Union was being threatened with invasion if they attempted to leave the coalition. Lisa immediately began planning operations to exploit the chaos within enemy ranks. Human intelligence services would target the remaining coalition, members with propaganda designed to increase their fears about Zephyrian dominance. Diplomatic channels would be opened with species that showed signs of wanting to abandon the war. Military strikes would focus on facilities shared by multiple alien governments to increase friction between supposed allies. Captain Tim Jackson received orders to lead the first major human offensive operation since the war began. Tim commanded a battle group of 30 ships that would strike at the Coalition Command Center in the Alpha Centauri system. The facility coordinated all enemy operations, and its destruction would cripple alien military effectiveness across multiple sectors. More importantly, a successful attack would prove that humans could project power beyond their own territory. Tim's force included ships equipped with the latest human technology, along with captured alien vessels that had been modified by human engineers. The hybrid fleet represented everything that humanity had learned during 10 months of desperate fighting. Advanced shields protected human ships, while improved weapons gave them striking power equal to much larger alien vessels. Most importantly, the crews had gained experience and confidence that made them superior to enemy forces of similar size. The approach to Alpha Centauri required Tim's ships to travel through 3 star systems controlled by different alien species. Human intelligence had identified safe routes that avoided major enemy concentrations, but the journey would take 5 days, during which discovery by alien patrols could doom the entire mission. Tim's captains used every trick they had learned to avoid detection while maintaining the formation necessary for a coordinated attack. Commander Linda Thompson opened negotiations with representatives of the Cytherian Star Union who had contacted humans through neutral intermediaries. Linda discovered that the Cytherians had joined the coalition only because of threats from more powerful neighbors, and they wanted to withdraw before their military forces suffered irreplaceable losses. The cat-like aliens were natural traders, rather than warriors, and they saw no benefit in continuing a war that was devastating their economy. Linda's discussions with Cytherian diplomats revealed the internal politics that were tearing apart the alien coalition. The Zephyrian Empire had started the war to eliminate human competition, but now found themselves fighting virtually alone as their allies abandoned the cause. The Saurian Republic remained committed to human extinction, but lacked the resources to achieve this goal without support from other species. The remaining coalition members were held together only by fear and mutual threats. The Cytherian Agreement became the first formal alliance between humans and a former enemy, the cat-like. Aliens provided detailed intelligence about coalition military capabilities in exchange for human protection against Zephyrian retaliation. More importantly, they offered their services as intermediaries to contact other species that wanted to abandon the war but feared the consequences of unilateral withdrawal. Engineer Alex Brown completed the most important technological breakthrough of the war in his laboratory on Titan Station. Alex had developed faster-than-light communication networks that allowed real-time coordination between human forces across vast distances. The quantum entanglement system could not be intercepted or jammed by alien technology, and it gave human commanders unprecedented tactical advantages in space combat. Alex's communication network enabled new strategies that had been impossible. When human forces could only coordinate through normal radio transmissions, ships separated by light years could now attack enemy targets simultaneously or respond instantly to changing tactical situations. The technology allowed smaller human forces to achieve coordination superior to much larger alien fleets that relied on conventional communication methods. The first test of Alex's network occurred when Captain Tim Jackson's battle group reached Alpha Centauri and found the enemy command center defended by over 200 alien ships. Tim's force was badly outnumbered, but the quantum communication system allowed his captains to coordinate their attack with precision that confused and overwhelmed enemy commanders. The human assault destroyed the command facility and scattered the defending fleet within hours. Major Susan Blake expanded her contacts with alien resistance movements as more species began to question their government's commitment to the anti-human war. Susan's agents now operated on 12 different worlds, where local populations were demanding an end to hostilities that had cost millions of lives and enormous resources. The human example of successful resistance had inspired independence movements throughout the galaxy. The most significant rebellion occurred within the Insectoid Collective, where worker castes refused to produce military equipment for the war effort. The insect-like aliens operated through strict social hierarchies, but prolonged casualties had disrupted their command structure and allowed lower castes to organize effective protests. Production of ships and weapons dropped by 70%, as the collective government struggled to maintain order. Susan received reports that similar unrest was spreading throughout the remaining coalition members. Aquarian civilians were demonstrating against continued military spending, while their economy collapsed under wartime taxation. Saurian military officers were questioning orders that sent them on suicide missions against increasingly effective human defenses. Even the disciplined Zephyrian Empire was experiencing dissent among younger generations who saw no future in endless warfare. Dr. Helen Ward analyzed the changing political situation and concluded that the alien coalition was entering its final phase of dissolution. Helen's intelligence indicated that only the Zephyrian Empire and Saurian Republic remained fully committed to human extinction, while their former allies either withdrew or actively worked to end the conflict. The war had transformed from humanity versus the galaxy into a struggle between freedom and tyranny. Helen recommended that humans begin planning for post-war reconstruction while continuing military operations against remaining enemies. The galaxy would need new institutions to prevent future conflicts, and humanity should take a leading role in establishing international law that protected the rights of all species. The war that had started with an ultimatum demanding human surrender would end with humanity as the champion of galactic liberty. Commander Julia Roberts led a combined fleet of human and Catherian ships in the first joint operation against their former enemies. Julia's force attacked Zephyrian supply depots in the Vega system, while Catherian vessels provided intelligence and logistical support. The successful raid demonstrated that cooperation between former enemies was possible and encouraged other species to consider switching sides. The battle at Vega marked a turning point where humans fought alongside former enemies against the Zephyrian Empire. Catherian ships proved effective partners despite their different technology and tactics. More importantly, the joint operation sent a message to remaining coalition members that humans were willing to forgive past hostilities and work together for a peaceful future. Captain Greg Austin received intelligence that the Saurian Republic was planning a final desperate assault on Earth itself using their remaining heavy battleships. Greg's squadron was assigned to intercept this attack before it could reach the inner system, where human defenses were still rebuilding after months of warfare. The coming battle would determine whether humanity's homeworld survived or fell to alien revenge. 2 years after the original ultimatum, Admiral Lisa Carter walked into the assembly hall of the newly constructed Galactic Independence Council station orbiting neutral space between former enemy territories. Delegates from 43 different species had gathered to establish new principles of interstellar relations based on freedom and cooperation rather than domination and fear. Lisa represented humanity in discussions that would reshape the political structure of the entire galaxy. The council meeting represented complete victory for human ideals, even though the war was not yet officially over. 5 of the original 7 coalition members had withdrawn from hostilities and signed peace agreements with humanity. The Aquarian Federation had become close allies after their civil war ended, with pro-peace forces taking control of their government. The Verdanian Republic and Catherian Star Union were founding members of the new galactic organization along with 17 other species that had gained independence during the conflict. Only the Zephyrian Empire and Saurian Republic continued to resist the changing order, but their position was hopeless. Both species faced internal rebellions inspired by human success, while their economies collapsed under the strain of prolonged warfare. Intelligence reports indicated that moderate factions within both governments were secretly negotiating surrender terms through neutral intermediaries. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the combined human-alien fleet that prepared for the final battle of the war at Proxima Station. Jake's force included ships from 8 different species united under the banner of the Galactic Independence Council. The enemy consisted of the last Zephyrian and Saurian vessels still loyal to their governments, along with mercenary units hired from the galactic underworld. The coming engagement would decide whether the old order of oppression would survive or die forever. The battle fleet that Jake commanded represented everything humanity had accomplished during 2 years of desperate struggle. Human ships, equipped with advanced hybrid technology, fought alongside former enemies who had become trusted allies. The quantum communication network allowed perfect coordination between vessels using completely different tactical doctrines. Most importantly, the crews shared a common purpose that transcended species differences and cultural barriers. Jake's intelligence staff reported that enemy morale was extremely low after months of defeats and defections. Many Zephyrian crews were planning to surrender rather than die for a cause they no longer believed in. Saurian officers had been ordered to fight to the death, but several units had already announced their intention to seek asylum with human forces. The final battle would likely end quickly once fighting began. Dr. Stephen Clark presented his analysis of post-war galactic politics to the Council delegates. Stephen explained that the collapse of the anti-human coalition had created opportunities for smaller species to achieve independence from larger powers. The war had demonstrated that united resistance could defeat seemingly overwhelming odds, and this lesson was being applied to liberation movements throughout the galaxy. Humanity's refusal to surrender had triggered the largest political transformation in galactic history. Stephen recommended that the new galactic organization should focus on protecting the rights of all species rather than maintaining the old system of domination by major powers. The Council should establish laws preventing the formation of aggressive coalitions while encouraging peaceful cooperation and trade. Most importantly, there should be mechanisms for resolving disputes without warfare that could devastate entire civilizations. The final battle began when Jake's fleet encountered the last enemy forces defending Proxima Station. The engagement lasted only 6 hours as Zephyrian and Saurian ships either surrendered or fled rather than face destruction. Jake offered honorable terms to all enemy personnel who laid down their weapons, and many chose to accept rather than continue fighting for governments that had already lost the war. Admiral Carter watched the surrender ceremony from the bridge of the UES Defiance as High Commander Vex formally ended Zephyrian resistance. The reptilian leader who had delivered the original ultimatum 2 years earlier now admitted that his species had made a terrible mistake in trying to enslave humanity. Carter accepted the surrender with dignity and immediately offered reconstruction, aid to help rebuild worlds damaged during the conflict. The Saurian Republic capitulated 3 days later when their home fleet mutinied rather than continue a hopeless war. General Pete Sullivan accepted the surrender of Saurian ground forces who had fought bravely, but recognized that further resistance was pointless. Pete's generous treatment of former enemies helped establish the precedent of reconciliation rather than revenge that would guide post-war reconstruction efforts. Commander Julia Roberts surveyed the transformed galaxy from her new position as head of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Julia commanded vessels from dozens of species working together to maintain stability while former enemies learned to coexist peacefully. The organization represented humanity's vision of cooperative security rather than the old system of competing military alliances that had led to the recent war. The peacekeeping force faced its first test when border disputes erupted between 2 minor species in the Outer Rim. Julia's mixed crews demonstrated that former enemies could work together effectively to mediate conflicts and prevent them from escalating into warfare. The successful intervention proved that the new galactic order could maintain peace through cooperation rather than fear. Dr. Helen Ward published her final report on the factors that had enabled humanity to survive and ultimately triumph against overwhelming odds. Helen concluded that human success came from their refusal to accept defeat, combined with their ability to inspire others to fight for freedom. The war had started as an attempt to enslave one species, but ended with the liberation of dozens of worlds from oppressive governments. Helen's analysis identified the key moments when the tide of war had turned in humanity's favor. The withdrawal of the first coalition member had encouraged others to question their commitment to the conflict. The destruction of the planet killer had demonstrated human determination to pay any price for freedom. The formation of alliances with former enemies had shown that cooperation was possible even after bitter warfare. Engineer Nick Davis completed construction of the first joint human-alien colony ship designed to explore regions beyond the galaxy's current borders. Nick's vessel incorporated the best technology from multiple species and represented the spirit of cooperation that had emerged from the ashes of war. The ship would carry volunteers from 20 different worlds to establish settlements based on equality and mutual respect. The colony ship New Horizon launched from Earth orbit exactly 2 years after the alien ultimatum had been delivered. Captain Maria Lopez commanded the mission that would establish humanity's first settlement in cooperation with former enemies. The crew included survivors from every major battle of the war, along with aliens who had fought against humanity before becoming trusted friends and partners. Dr. Kevin Moore addressed the graduating class of the new Galactic Technology Institute, where students from dozens of species learned to combine their different scientific traditions. Kevin explained that the greatest discoveries came from cooperation between minds that approached problems from completely different perspectives. The Institute represented hope for a future where knowledge would be shared freely rather than hoarded for military advantage. The transformation of galactic civilization was complete when the first interspecies marriage occurred between a human diplomat and a Catherian trade representative. The ceremony was attended by delegates from the Galactic Independence Council and symbolized the personal bonds that were replacing ancient hatreds. Children born from such unions would grow up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal rather than exceptional. Admiral Carter delivered her final address as commander of human military forces before retiring to civilian life. Carter reminded her audience that humanity's greatest victory was not military, but moral, because they had refused to compromise their principles even when facing extinction. The war had ended not with the destruction of enemies, but with their transformation into friends and allies. The memorial wall aboard the UES Defiance displayed the names of every human who had died defending freedom during the 2-year war. Visitors from across the galaxy came to pay their respects to people who had sacrificed everything rather than surrender their independence. The memorial served as a reminder that liberty required constant vigilance and sometimes the ultimate sacrifice to preserve. Commander Beth Young's name held a place of honor among the heroes commemorated on the memorial wall. Her sacrifice had saved humanity from extinction and inspired countless others to fight for freedom rather than accept oppression. The planet. Killer Mission had become legend throughout the galaxy as an example of what free people could accomplish when they refused to bow to tyranny.